Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Health Mastery Podcast. My guest today is Scott Compton. He is the founder of EMF Warriors. He's an expert in EMFs, and he's probably the best person to talk about this. He's actually one of the three founders of EMF Warriors. And Scott, can you introduce yourself in a little bit more details?
Sure. Yeah, I'm like Daniel just said, I'm one of the founders of EMF Warriors. We created the group about a year and a half ago. And we just wanted to message out to people the issue that intersects people's health, especially, and just the fields and frequencies going on in their lives that they might not have any clue about. So my background, I used to be a biologist at Stanford University. I've been in technology for the last 23 years. And I have pretty well, I've followed the science of quantum biology, of chronobiology, of genetics, epigenetics, mitochondrial functions, all kinds of stuff in the last 10, 15 years as a hobby. So I just do it because I love doing it. And because of that in my own electrosensitivities, I'm actually sensitive to the EMFs. So I started getting sensitive to them back in 1996, 97 area of my life. So quite a long time ago, over 20 years ago.
And how this thing happens, basically?
My sensitivities are interesting. They are more up in my head, like in my eyes and in my ears. So I'll get more tinnitus when I'm in lower or higher electrical field, like magnetic or electrical fields or microwave radiation. If I use the phone closer to my head, even for 5 minutes, I could get tinnitus or have the risk of having an eye rupture in the back of my retina, where I will have problems because I'll start seeing spots and stuff in my vision. So over the years, I've done all types of hacks and biohacks and mito hacks, even things where now to this day, I really don't have many problems in my ears and eyes because of what I do and how I live. But other people, I'm sure, are suffering from all kinds of ailments. I mean, the most common form of electromagnetic hypersensitivity would be feeling tingles. If you have your phone in your hand, you feel tingles in your fingers as you have that phone active. That's a very common symptom that people get. Or they feel like brain fog, or they get a headache, things like this when they get exposure to different EMFs.
Does this come from biology, or we somehow get a disease about
it's still, yeah, in the medical literature and in the science, it's still an ongoing investigation, like a Sherlock Holmes kind of process going on, because there are people, some percentage of the population, and people think right now it's somewhere between 12 to 20% of the population will experience direct feelings of having electrosensitivities. I think it's actually a larger number, and it has to do with the accumulation of just using tech day in and day out and exposures over time. So in my case with my eyes and my ears, in the 1970s, I grew up with televisions right in my face, watching Saturday morning cartoons and playing the old video games like the Atari 2600, right there with the screen. And then I slept in a waterbed for over 12 years. And waterbeds, because of the heater systems in them, will produce electric fields. To step back a bit, EMFs are electromagnetic fields. And EMFs also, because they're fields, they're along the EM spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. There are different frequencies along that spectrum. So an electric field that comes off of our power grid, that's like there, I think in Europe is 50 hertz, and over here is 60 hertz in the US. Those lower frequencies produce electric fields, even with a plug cord in, plug into your wall, and it's actively in your wall and the circuit breaker is on in your wall. That cord will have an electric field associated with it. For instance, you have a lamp plugged in. You can measure with a device and see the electric field all along that wire and even up to the lamp in a pretty strong electric field, typically maybe 10 to 50 milligauss field that you can measure. Now, the moment you turn the lamp on, a magnetic field also appears with the electric field. So like when I was sleeping in my waterbed, just because of the heater system, I was getting an electric field and a magnetic field in my bed as I was sleeping, and your body regenerates when you're sleeping. And I was doing this for 12 years. I think that might have led me down the path to being more electrosensitive, because I was in fields and frequencies more commonly, even in the 1980s, right? Where most people don't think even about the lower frequencies these days, because everyone's got their tablet or their phone, right? And they're getting the higher frequencies. And blue light that comes off, like the screen we're looking at right now, the blue light, as you know, that comes off of these screens is a form of EMF. I mean, it's a non-native EMF. It's just, again, it's higher in the electromagnetic spectrum. So we have all kinds of these man-made exposures going on around us, and really our bodies, I believe, are meant to be attuned to the natural frequencies of the earth, which is called the Schumann resonance, which is at 7.83 hertz, and then to the sunlight frequencies that come in and are atmospherically filtered, and they're not pulsed like our man-made tech, like off the power grid. Things are pulsed that come off, and the electromagnetic field flips. And the frequencies we get from the blue light, like, you know, even like the flicker effect, like from the Iris program that helps to mitigate that, like that flicker, that pulsing element is like not in the sunlight. So our signaling systems in our biology, I think we're going to discover more and more and more in the science as it rolls on, that we're more attuned to not having this breakup in this modulated light or this really weird waveform of light. We're more used to this constant flow of light into our biology for our health.
So to return a little bit backwards, EMFs are actually light which we can't see. Is this correct?
It's okay. So the best way, the high level way I like to present this to people that this sounds complex, is just thinking about Einstein's relativity formula, or not relativity, but Einstein's formula that E equals mc squared, which is energy equals matter or mass times the speed of light squared. So the equivalence, these things are equivalent. So energy, light, and mass are all equivalent to each other. So when you have like electromagnetic fields, you have a component of photon packets that are coming at us, but with energy on the photons. Like so it's like energy and light combined, this interesting form depending on the state of the energy that's coming in on it. So this is like how we get all plants to grow on the planet, right? Because we have the sunlight, the photons coming in with energy that's growing the plant. And also the sunlight's beneficial for us in doses. Like the dose size is everything, right? So that's what we're trying to expose to the whole world and the public about EMFs, is that, do you actually know the dose size that you're getting in your environments with these non-native electromagnetic frequencies?
And is this a bigger problem in the United States than it is in other parts of the world? Because you thought that there is difference hertz rate of the flicker and the EMFs?
Yeah, so this gets into the complexity of the issue where, for instance, like there in Europe, like you have a 50 hertz power grid, just the low level frequencies of all of your appliances that you plug into, where we have a 60 hertz power grid. Just the fact that you're absorbing a 50 hertz grid, I'm absorbing a 60 hertz grid, the questions in the biophysics now start to come into, like, well, what is it in our bodies that use 50 hertz or 60 hertz or different harmonics based on those hertz frequencies? So you go 50 hertz, 100 hertz, 150 hertz, 200 hertz. So it turns out and I don't, like, I've heard through various sources that the mitochondria at the fifth cytochrome, which is the end of the chain of the mitochondria, we have this rotor that spins for our energy generation of our ATP. And because many people believe the spin rate is around 100 hertz, it's possible, I'm not sure, but it's possible there might be interactions because you're in a 50 hertz grid over there, and then your mitochondria, if they are optimally trying to spin at 100 hertz, as like Dr. Douglas Wallace has implied, then what happens to our mitochondrial energy production, for instance, in the body, right? And then, like in Robert O. Becker's works, who pretty much through the 1960s really started to look into these, the regeneration systems, like how you grow bone in humans. And these really important aspects, like the fact that he was nominated. Here's a really interesting thing about light. He was nominated for a Nobel Prize because of his discovery that bones are actual natural LEDs, like they're light emitting diodes in the red light spectrum are bones. So like, yeah.
Can you repeat this?
Yeah, like Becker, one of his Nobel Prize nominations was for his discovery of how our bones are actual natural LEDs. They're lights. They're LEDs.
Is it because of the phosphor or something like this?
It's because of what's called the piezoelectric effect, where if you stress bone, the mechanical energy is converted into electrical energy when you put stress on your bones. And this emits light in the infrared range. It's pretty amazing stuff. Like, so like when you think about, like most people like listening to this live stream might be thinking, wait a minute, what about all the biochemistry and all this other stuff going on? Well, yes, biochemistry and genetics, all this stuff matters as well, but it's like kind of a slice of the entire pie. And what a lot of people miss in their knowledge of in society, what we usually absorb from the media or other scientific sources is we only hear the biochemistry. We're not hearing the biophysics as much, all of this interesting mechanics with light and with energy in our bodies. So like Robert O. Becker, he discovered this electromagnetic energy system built into us. And it's even topological, like with on top of the skin and where different points conduct electricity through our bodies. And this electromagnetic energy is ultra weak. Like you really can't detect it with typical means. You have to have very sensitive machines to detect this very weak electrical energy. But this what's called EE, the electromagnetic energy, is a driver. It's like a gate for different signaling systems and processes in the biochemistry. So if you remove that out of the equation, only focus on the biochemistry, you're not getting the whole biology of how we are creatures of light, we're creatures of energy, and we're creatures of matter. You can't like remove any of those aspects from what we are. But what is our modern health? Like our modern hospitals, our doctors, our trained doctors don't know much about EMFs. So we have a big disconnect that needs to like be unveiled to the world in the coming years to cure or reverse a lot of these modern diseases a lot of people are experiencing. And now the whole flood of the non-native frequencies into our environments are now helping to have various dysfunctions in different mechanisms in the biology. And that's where the science needs to go to like start connecting the dots between electrical and magnetic and radio frequency and microwave. Like every cell phone on the planet is in the microwave part of the spectrum. So it's honest to say that if you put a phone up to your brain, you are microwaving your brain at way lower intensity compared to a microwave oven. And it's at a different frequency as well. Typically they're like 600 to 900 megahertz versus a microwave oven that is at 2.45 gigahertz. But regardless, now that you know that the electromagnetic energy in the body that we use is ultra weak, it doesn't take a lot of intensity to have biological effects. And that's what's missing again from the narrative, from industry, from everyone else in the world that say that, well, we have these standards set, and the standards are set quite low in the intensity, and having this cell phone up to your brain doesn't like emit that much EMF. Well, they're telling you relative, but they're not telling you the amount of the very low amounts of energy our bodies actually use to actually drive biochemical processes in the body. So really, there is no established safe level of non-native EMF at this point, because there is a potential of biological interaction with all of this stuff.
And what was the hertz rate of the mitochondria and the Schumann resonance again? Is it the same?
No. So the Schumann resonance, you're saying the hertz rate? So
yes.
So the Schumann resonance is right around 8 hertz. As a matter of fact, it's at 7.83 measured. And this was done like back in the 1950s after a teacher, his name was Schumann. So the Schumann resonance is named after this guy who discovered that the entire planet pulses this resonance, right, at 7.83 hertz. But the interesting thing is that in the last 10 years, we've been seeing fluctuations even in Earth's pulse, where it's a little, makes you kind of go, like, why is the Earth itself like pulsing potentially at a slightly different rate, and then it will come back down back to that Schumann resonance from time to time. So there are other things probably at work that we don't know about. But the mitochondria, that spins at 100 hertz. And as a matter of fact, Robert O. Becker's works show that most of the regeneration processes in the human body are between 1 to 30 hertz, kind of in that whole range, that lower range under 50 or 60 hertz. Like 1 to 30 hertz is where a lot of our regeneration programs for our bone, for our tissues, for our organs, for our brain, like a lot of these are in that area. And just mentioning the brain, like our more of like our sleeping alpha waves that are in our brain are exactly the Schumann resonance at 7.83 hertz. So our alpha waves we produce as humans is equal to the beat of the planet, of the Earth, and our like beta waves and other waves in us will go up from that 7.83. Actually, it can go down even lower than 7.83 in like meditative states. And it can get up into really higher ranges, like more into the 60 to 80 hertz range when the brain is really active in certain places. So the brain kind of has this variance depending on circadian rhythm, like what time of day it is, what the brain is like at and pulsing at as an electric organ. We have to we have to start thinking of our heart and our brains as electric organs, because we can measure with a like a squid machine, we can measure an EMF field that comes off of our brains. It's like this ultra weak EMF field, but it's like it goes out 3, 4, 5 feet away from our brains. And then from our hearts, we have a much larger field that can go out like even 10 feet or more from our hearts, measured on some of these machines. So we are electromagnetic. We are, like I was saying, we are light, we're energy, and we're matter. So we can't just like take that out of the equation like industry likes to do. Like they will take and they'll use like for the SAR rating, which is the specific absorption rate, for measuring like what heat effects are going to happen in the brain or in the head when you put a phone against it. And they have a rating system built into every, like all the fine print and all the devices and phones saying, don't put your phone close to your head. They'll always say, oh, they actually don't say close to your head. They say close to your body, because the body can also mean your head, but they don't say your head because everybody's putting it to their head. but the specific absorption rate is based on a military dummy with like a water sugary filled fluid to measure the heat absorption. So it's not even a test of the electrical brain we have. It's using water and a sugary substance to measure should you put a phone or not next to your brain. There you go. That's the world we're living in.
So what is actually the interaction between the EMFs and our brain and body? How does it happen, the interaction?
So our brains are electrical, so it's naturally producing these fields from it. When you put a phone against it, we have to like start diving deeper. This might get a little complex. I'll try to keep it so people understand. When you put like a frequency, an EMF against your head or your lungs or down here, right? You're holding it down here. And you're like surfing the internet and you have it next to your gut or your kidneys or your testes or your ovaries, then you have to look, okay, the basic unit of life is what? A cell. So you have to start looking now at a cell and what happens to a cell when you have EMFs hitting a cell. And on the outside of cells are mainly, the outside cell membranes are mainly made of fats. And they're like phospholipid bilayers. It's like a technical term, but like the fats that are surrounding the cell are also very hydrated well, and they have little pores like in those cell membranes that have different receptor sites and different channels for things, for like having like different electrolytes going in and out of the cell for different homeostasis of that cell. And when an EMF hits that cell, we can see in the science that on the what are called voltage gated calcium channels, this goes back to Dr. Martin Pall's works, we can see a disruption happen where calcium can flood into the cell and make the cell more volatile. And more damage can happen because then you can produce more free radicals with different EMF exposures. And when there's more free radicals and not enough antioxidants to compensate for the free radicals, which is kind of a measure of redox potential, then you have the dysregulation, the dysfunction of the cell, and the energy doesn't work as well in the cell over time. Mitochondrial mutants can be potentially created. We don't know this for sure yet in the science, but as a cell's health is a relative measure of how well the mitochondria are functioning in there, because if the mitochondria are producing the energy that the cell needs to live, then everything goes well and disease doesn't try to express itself. But when the energy starts to fall down and the cell can't actually destroy itself even, which is a mechanism called apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death for all the programmers out there listening. Like programmed cell death is a real thing our bodies do and needs to do. About 10 billion of your cells per day naturally go through programmed cell death as a healthy mechanism to purge out all the old crap and to make new daughter cells so the cells function and run with good energy again. Just like you want your car to run strong with good energy, the moment it starts sputtering and going bad, you have to take it to the car shop.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it's not like the wireless electricity when the two fields collide and produce electricity, but it's more like producing free radicals. Is that correct?
That's one of many mechanisms that we're seeing in the science where, yes, that when you have the EMF interacting with a surface of a cell, those voltage gated channels start becoming just more chaotic, and they can't control the flow of the different elements in and out of the cell like they normally should control. As a matter of fact, after an EMF exposure, we're seeing that there could be a time frame after an initial exposure where the cells are still disrupted after that exposure. So like another mechanism is like the blood-brain barrier that prevents a lot of the heavy metals and toxins and things from entering your brain. Again, if you put a phone or a microwave frequency, I should say, because phones produce microwave frequencies, you have certain types of frequencies, and like the pulse, like all the variables of the frequency needs to be also figured out in the science as well. But like just looking at a typical frequency against some of the brains of people, we see the blood-brain barrier is disrupted as well from this stuff. So a person that, let's say, had been talking or been using a device around the head, and you have a disruption, that can allow more heavy metals and things to get into places they're not supposed to go into in the biology. So we have a real problem where science is not, like, there hasn't been a lot of funding or a lot of science that really like demonstrates like hundreds and thousands of times over again. Like there is science that shows this happening, but like we have to get more of the funding and the biology and where the money's being poured into the biophysics as much as the biochemistry. So people in labs and research labs are getting their money for like looking at specific, like just mechanics of like, okay, well, what happens like to this voltage gated calcium channel with the calcium going through it, but they might not be being funded for, well, instead of having, let's say, a aluminum or another mercury or thallium or another element that is a known damaging agent, right? If you get that into your cell, some of these elements are very unhealthy when these certain elements will get into certain spaces in the cell. So they're testing more of these kind of things for heavy metal toxicity, right? Like this is more in the literature rather than seeing a ton of stuff out there, like an equal or equivalent amount of stuff with EMF exposures. So we have like a big problem in the scientific community overall. There is science showing this, don't get me wrong, but it's not like as much science compared to all the other biochemistry that's out there that most research labs work on. So there needs to, yeah, go ahead.
Is it because this is so difficult to test and to reproduce?
No, like we can set this up. It's more of a funding problem, because why would industry that uses technology want to fund or help fund something that could undermine their technology, rather than, like, here's the way I see it. This is, the cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. Like, we know, like, scientists across the world know that EMFs are going to be harmful to people. The non-native, the pulse kind. Now, even the ionizing radiation that can bump electrons out in certain dose sizes are not good for us also. Like when you go through an x-ray machine, right? Or if you get too much UV on you for a prolonged period of time, you don't want to sit out in the sun and get burned, right? You want to sit out in the sun for the vitamin D and the signaling mechanisms, and you get your dose size of the sun. I mean, I love to use this analogy, and this like hits it home. This hits it out of the park for people. Would you ever drink a gallon of water at the same time? Just chug a gallon of water? Of course not, because that will kill you. You would never drink a gallon of water at once. You do it for the dose size, because you have a pint of water to rehydrate yourself. You don't have a gallon at once. So how we are looking at the dose size with the frequency, like all the variables, like the crazy number of variables in place, they matter in the biology. But most people in industry thinking about this have no biological background. So they're only thinking of the physics, the intensity of the frequency coming in, very rarely thinking about, well, is this modulated waveform, could that have an influence on our biology? Oh, maybe not. We'll just like omit that from the equation altogether and just like talk about intensity of this stuff and compare it to the sun, which is a totally, like, it comes in differently compared to like what we produce, but they'll compare it to the sun saying, oh, the sun is so damaging for us. But yes, it's damaging at the right dose size. It's not like it's healthy at the right dose size. So this is what we have to like start looking into and being honest about how the biophysics works in biology. And most people don't have that background to like think about those details or those variables.
So it's more like because big companies want to produce more technology, and where do you think?
Well, yeah, why wouldn't they? I mean, I'm totally for technology if it's safe. So how do you define safe, right? So I think there can be a marriage between safe technologies and how we use them and our exposures and knowing what we get. But right now it's all hidden. People don't know what they're getting. They don't know their exposures. And it seems like it would be a huge liability problem if suddenly everyone tomorrow woke up and realized, okay, I want to test the EMFs in my house. Whoa, that computer's producing a ton of stuff. How do I mitigate that? Do I have to like put a special cage around it? Why wasn't this PC built with a cage in the first place to help minimize the EMF, right? It starts asking deeper questions about how we're using the tech, how we're designing the tech, because if we can design this tech where it doesn't expose us to the EMFs as much, that's now a new market for all technology people in the world listening. You can go make tech that is designed to minimize EMF, and you have a market of people on the horizon that want to buy that. So there you have it. Like, there can be a marriage. It's like, we are not anti-tech. There's no anti-tech about this. Like, it's about logic, using, like, just not putting our bodies into these kind of exposures, because it doesn't take much intensity to cause exposures. And then our behaviors with the tech is the other side of it that people don't like to even talk about, because everybody's got their device in their hand and they're using it totally at the wrong times of day, crashing their circadian biology, and they're pulsing like right at your hand. Like when you're connected to a phone tower, this device in your hand is producing a lot of non-native EMF in the microwave range, which even if this phone was maybe even 5 feet away, I'd still be getting it hit to some of the topology of my biology. It might not be penetrating deep, like if I had it next to here in my head. It's not necessarily penetrating throughout my skull. It could be. If I'm a child and I have a small skull, it could be just bam right through it. But there's a law in physics, which is the inverse square law, which at least we can use that to our advantage right now. We can pull away these devices farther away from our spaces where we're working. Like right now, I don't know if you can see it, I have a wired keyboard and my monitor is a good 5 feet away. My computer's, again, 5 feet away. My speakers that emit electrical and magnetic fields are far away. My mouse is wired. So I've got my whole space that I'm sitting in right now pretty much comes down to closer to zero. Although even on my property, there's just background magnetic fields. And a lot of properties just out there because of the power grid and the wires running through the ground or the wires going around your house, like you'll have some like weaker magnetic fields to even stronger fields going on. So when you're sleeping, especially, like I like to turn off some of the circuit breakers to where I sleep, because it shuts down a lot of the natural electric fields that are in the environment. So I'm almost closer to sleeping in nature when I shut down some of the circuit breakers, and I can measure and know my body voltage and what my body voltage is at to know what is actually going down in my system. So this is where EMF Warriors does come in, and it plays just this giant role to like let people know the depth and craziness of the interaction of this issue into people's health.
Do you have a measurement device about EMFs? And what we can do basically to remove or reduce the effect of EMF? For example, does iris help? Does caging help? Or some other tips like this?
Yeah, like especially from, okay, let's talk a little bit about the screen EMFs, like the light that comes off of it. So the different frequencies that come off of your screen, right, are often like, they can go down below 300 nanometer, like into the 300 nanometer range, and then up typically 600-700 up into the red light frequencies off of your screen. So the screen light that comes off, right, is a flicker effect. And like, you know, programs like Iris helps to eliminate and balance that out, so we're not being like pulsed, like, you know, in our signaling systems aren't being hit continuously like da, 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 and our irises themselves don't have to react to it and like squint and go like this all the time. So that's helpful, right, in and of itself, but it really goes back to the chronobiology, the circadian rhythm that's built into us. So my biggest hack in the first gateway to health is fixing your circadian rhythm if you can, getting out. What I do, I can't say that I should recommend this for anybody, but I'll tell you what I do. I get out into morning sunlight for at least 15, 20 minutes every morning, as close to dawn as possible. And that will help set your circadian rhythm for the day. And then I try to like weave in, like even when I'm at work, I'll like walk outside just for even 5 minutes, like maybe once in the morning or twice in the morning. And then at lunch, I'll typically go out, and when I have lunch, I'll sit outside eating lunch, or I'll do something at home, or I'll lay out in the sun, or I'll take a bike ride in the sun. I'll do something in the sunlight midday. So it's telling my body, okay, it was morning. Now it's midday. The lux level, the intensity of the sunlight has increased. Obviously at solar noon is the highest lux level. And then later in the day, I'll try to always catch the sunset. And then when I catch a sunset, after catching the sunset, like these are rated blue blockers. I'll even have these on with the iris. So I'm not telling my body through my eyes, which are your eyes are your gateway to your brain. Your eyes are your brain. Think of your eyes as your brain, because do you want to tell your brain at 10 o'clock at night, where you are right now in Europe, do you want to tell your brain that it's actually noon right now? No. You want to tell your brain it's getting close to sleep time. So you start producing more melatonin, which is a free radical scavenger that helps prevent oxidative stress in cells. So having more melatonin you generate naturally is a beautiful thing, because you're helping to fight the damage we received from the free radicals earlier in the day. And if you're not blue blocking in the evening with these frequencies, you're just telling your biology it's still noon. And then when you sleep at night, you're not getting the power of the medicinal power of your biology just naturally by creating melatonin and by like regenerating deeper. Like if you sleep really deeply, if you're dreaming, it's a very good sign your circadian rhythm is in good check, like it's working well. If you have brain fog, if you're not remembering your dreams, there could be other interactions with either visible light that we're getting at nighttime, or not getting enough sunlight in the day exposures to triggering our biology to do a stronger circadian rhythm. Or even later at night, you could be sleeping in EMFs. You could have a smart meter outside your wall, and it's pulsing in radio frequency. Or you could have your Wi-Fi router on nearby. So like I tell this to people jokingly, I'm like, if you're really looking to destroy your health, it might be a good idea you put your cell phone next to your bedstand. You have all your electrical plugs going under your bed. You can sleep on a wired mattress to help bring more frequencies to your body. You could put the Wi-Fi router in your bedroom instead of the office and have your Wi-Fi router on a few feet from your brain. You could do a lot of, things with our man-made technology to make sure your sleep is really terrible. If you really want to do that, it's your choice.
So you basically need to turn off everything, and this is actually what I do. I turn off the router and all the lights around me. But so it's a good thing to remember your sleep. Is this correct?
It's like if you get your sleep down, that will just put way more years on your life, and you will like have more melatonin, more regeneration systems are going to be working throughout your tissues, your brain, your organs. The mitochondria can repair itself. And what I was saying earlier about apoptosis is very important, because Imagine if your cells did not have programmed cell death and they were just using Franken cells, right? Like instead of like cells that are kind of zombie-like, that are half alive, and your body's working off of those instead of killing those zombie cells and creating better, healthy cells for your energy in your body. Because what we see in the science is that when you have these lower energy yield cells going on and the mitochondria will get damaged, then that's when you're risking a disease expression later on. So if your body stalls with the apoptosis and it doesn't actually cycle out and your apoptosis is almost shut down, then that's like one of the two major ways you can get cancer.
Can you repeat this?
Yeah, it's really simple. If your programmed cell death, which is apoptosis, starts slowing down in your body and it's not killing off the bad cells and regenerating them with new daughter cells, it's one of the two main gates for the expression of many cancers.
And it slows down when you're not getting enough sleep and when you're exposed to EMF.
Yeah, our circadian rhythm, well, like apoptosis is stimulated by many different mechanisms, including sunlight. And like there are certain known biochemical substances you can eat that claim to help with stimulating that. And in the mechanisms, it looks like they probably do.
What are some of them?
What's that?
What are some of these substances?
Well, you have to know deeper the biology. It goes into the mitochondria and it goes into, there's a place in the mitochondria that is a kind of like the information that is the programming for programmed cell death. So the mitochondria is a controller for apoptosis. So if your mitochondria are not functioning well, then your apoptosis just will naturally start slowing down. And I don't want to make this too complex, but like this is why certain types of foods like carotenoids or even chocolate, like dark chocolate, has some like resveratrol and PQQ and some other things that your mitochondria can actually use to help boost your mitochondria. But it's not really a great strategy. Like even like the whole new like cannabinoid oils, right? Like the CBD oils, they're working really well to help with the stimulation of apoptosis. So it's not just like, and I don't take it. I just know that there's the endocannabinoid system built into complex 4 of the mitochondria. And it just so happens that people that do weed don't realize that they're actually like they're stalling a disease coming in because they're activating their mitochondria in another way, almost as a hack. It's like a biohack that they don't know they're doing, but they're craving it because they realize it's healthy in some weird way. This is what's going on. We have the endocannabinoid system built into the mitochondria. If you activate that more, it stimulates that control center to make the apoptosis working better. And that's just like one part of the mitochondrial chain though, because this entire electron transport chain has to work correctly. So it's not just about complex 4. It's also about complex 1 and 2 that, like if you're eating more carbohydrates, you're activating complex 1 more. And when you're doing that, there's more free radical generation because of complex 1 compared to complex 2 when you're eating more fats. So when you're eating more fats, you're going to be just naturally creating less free radicals compared to if you're pounding complex 1 by eating more carbohydrates. So like there's different strategies. It's really interesting. Once you learn about the mitochondria, you can start thinking about the different strategies on how you want the energy to actually, that ATP to be generated in your
So you can basically generate ATP with both chocolate and carbs and with both fat and low carb diets. Is this correct?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when you use fats, it's way more energy efficient because you produce way more ATP compared to when you do carbs. That's why, like when you see marathon, I ran a marathon, right? Back in 2002, I ran a marathon. And what was I doing at the time? I carb loaded. And like every 3 miles along the way, there's a carb station for refueling the carbs back into you, because it's a short energy supply. You get carbs, you get the short energy supply, you're good for another few miles, you burn out the carbs, you have to refuel again. Well, guess what? If you use more fats, you get more energy efficiency. You don't have to have a carb stop every 3 miles.
And
right?
you can actually go to the this so-called black spot when you switch to fat, right? In the marathon.
Well, like you basically go through this process in cytochrome complex 2 called beta oxidation, where you're burning off more fat. It's a kind of like it's actually a very interesting weird part of the subunit of the mitochondria, because this part is actually coded for in the nuclear genome of our body in complex 2, where complex 1, all the machinery is coded for in the mitochondrial DNA. So there's different, like the mitochondria is this really crazy integrated piece of machinery built into us for generating energy, because there's all these inner links from the mitochondrial DNA. Like when I say this, I'm literally saying there is specific DNA that's only in your mitochondria, that's inherited through your maternal line. So from your mother, you have your mother's mitochondrial DNA in you, not your father's. And that mother's DNA in the mitochondria codes for much of the energy generation systems in our bodies. So, and it's a different form. It's not wrapped up in like a double helix. It's actually got a circular kind of pattern to it, almost like a donut, and it doesn't have histones and other protection wrapped around this part of our DNA, so it's more exposed to the elements, if you can think of it that way. So that's why like all these new diseases with our technologies, I believe, are very tightly linked to the less protection our mitochondrial DNA have compared to our nuclear genome. Your nuclear DNA determines like your hair color and your eye color and your body size and like just all the basic foundations, like the structure of yourself, more than the mitochondria is like the energy management. So like to programmers and designers out there in the world, we like to say this analogy, like your mitochondria is like the software that can plug into your nuclear hardware, and then you can manipulate the energy like within the mitochondria. We can manipulate it with food, right? What food we choose. We can manipulate it with different substances we take in, and we can manipulate this with light, like getting out into the sun to charge your system, to get your redox working better, because that mitochondria is creating water. It like produces carbon dioxide and water as the exhaust out of the mitochondria. And that water is very healthy water that your mitochondria makes. And this is where this gets into water physics now, with how to charge up this water lattice to make the water even more efficient for energy in your body. So being in the sun, at least getting some red light specifically from the sun into your body, can really help the water physics also work well in your body. So it's like this, biology is becoming this really complex, crazy thing, because there's so much. And it's like such a long learning curve that no one can get this and just digest it in a few weeks even, or a few months. Like if you really want to know what's going on to help your health, you have to really get making it a thing in your life that you want to like pursue, to like understand how all this is put together, because otherwise it becomes just a trust issue. You're going to say, well, I'm going to trust my doctor has this information, versus I'm going to trust maybe this researcher has this information, or this, like me, a past biologist who's been doing this as a hobby has this information. Like it becomes a trust level at some point where you're going to be like, is this guy like what he's saying, am I going to believe it? And if in order to know if you believe it, you have to check out what the science says. You have to go to the scientific literature and then start connecting across the disciplines. Like I was saying, like I was just talking about water physics before I was talking about light physics, and then the biophysics in the body, how this works. Like there's so much to learn about all this. that I wouldn't expect a lot of people to really grasp what is going on for after 4, 5, 6 years, and even if they've had a biology or chemistry or science degree. It's intimidating, but there are enough people out there now that know what's happening, and our researchers are very specialized in their areas that they can, go to other researchers that are specialized in other areas, and hopefully if they're communicating, then they start also connecting the dots, even in the scientific community.
And can we say that the biggest booster to the mitochondria is the sunlight, actually?
Yeah, it's like the first driver. I mean, a good way to think about this is a plant, like a potato plant. Potato plants have chloroplasts in them, right? For gathering the light energy. Everybody knows a chloroplast is for photosynthesis. And what photosynthesis is doing is growing a plant from nothing, this little seed, into a nice plant. But most people don't realize there's a lot of mitochondria in a lot of plants as well. And the mitochondria in a potato plant is actually quite strong. Like there's a lot of mitochondrial density in a potato plant. So plants use both systems for working, for like using the mitochondria for energy and using chloroplast for energy. But what's interesting is when we look into our bodies and like our blood system, our hemoglobin, if you look at the hemoglobin molecule compared to a chloroplast, you'll see, like in an image side by side, they look almost identical. So this is like this, back in like 2014 on Dr. Jack Cruz's site, he started putting this up and just blowing people away, because when you see that the chloroplast and the hemoglobin, when you actually look at them through the eyes of a biologist like myself, I see that they look visually like a solar panel. They look like an actual photoreceptor, right? Like they absorb light, because in the center of the chloroplast, center of a chlorophyll. Chloroplast is the organelle. In the center of the chlorophyll is a magnesium element. Magnesium stuck in the center, and you can see 4 like little solar panels around the magnesium. And then when you look at a heme group off of your hemoglobin, you see exactly the same thing. You see 4 solar panels with iron in the center. So what this is telling us is that when you expose your veins and your arteries to sunlight, especially the red light that's coming in, and even the UV light that's coming in, the charge change can happen, and you can absorb some of that energy into your blood. And a lot of like, this reminds me of a lot of
red light, because it enters deeper into our body, right?
Well, red light because it enters deeper, but also red light because it interacts with the water lattice more in your blood. And your blood is like 95 to 98% water, because it's like rivers running through your body. So it can help charge up and just promote the benefits of the charge states differences and pull more energy into your body. But also all these other mechanisms are happening, like the different proteins can be changed to different proteins with light interactions, proteins our bodies might actually need that they're lacking. So we can produce, and different hormones, right? So like tryptophan and tyrosine, they produce different neurological hormones like dopamine and serotonin, melatonin. So like a lot of these mechanisms where we're getting, like, we eat the basic food stuff, but then what do you do with that food stuff once it's in our body? We convert it to the things we need. And down in the cells, deeper in the cells in the mitochondria, that electron transport chain, we break down the foods to push protons and electrons. The protons are like in this gradient, but the electrons are being used off of the foods to interact with oxygen
to drive this entire chain of event to spin this rotor at the end to produce that ATP. So at the end of the day, it's like, that's why you can use carbs and why you can use fats, because it's really not about the carb and the fat. It's deeper than that. It's about the electrons and the protons. That's what's important, and how we're using them. So that's why when a lot of people, we even advocate this on EMF Warriors, we like to see people go out and ground themselves in nature, because grounding can help balance out and pull more electrons into your body just by touching the earth, if you're in a non-electrified place, right? So by doing that, and like I like to think of the animals around, like I have a lot of deer and squirrels and bunnies out where I live, and they're forced to be out there at sunrise. They're always touching the earth. You know, they're walking around, they're in sun all day long. They're not putting on sunscreen as little bunnies. They don't wear sunscreen. You know, they don't get sunburned. Now, granted, if you're out in really high intensity sun down in the tropics or whatever, you'll see the animals, they'll go into shade. They'll go under trees. They'll go behind a rock. I mean, so they just naturally know to, like, when they want the sun, when they don't want the sun. And they're always grounded to the earth. Like an elephant has no choice to be grounded to the earth. What's interesting, of all the species on the planet, elephants have the lowest cancer rates of all species on the planet. Now, it could be related to grounding and sun because they're always in it, but they also have some other genetic benefits built into them. But like, when we look at wildlife and we look at how things live, and we're like, wait a minute, they're not coming down with why isn't that squirrel coming down with Parkinson's disease? You know, why isn't that bunny coming down with autism? Why isn't that, you know, like, we can start thinking about how, as a reflection point, how animals are getting the benefit and they're mitigating problems in their worlds because they have no choice but to be in the sun and to be grounded.
Super awesome. And so one of the tip is get more sunlight. Second tip is get grounded. So you get electrical charge to your body, right?
Well, I would say be careful, because like you need to acclimate to the sun. It's not like, yeah, we do need more sun, but be logical and reasonable about it. First research it. And like in the springtime, I start getting out and exposing myself. But even me, I'm pretty fair skinned. I won't go usually beyond an hour, hour and a half, because I'll risk getting burned, right? And I'll cover up some of the more sensitive areas. Like I won't have like my direct face in the sun, but I'll be getting the ambient light, you know, from the sun. Like I'll just put on a hat, right? Or I'll turn my body over every 20 minutes if I'm laying out, so I don't like over fry one side. You know, you just like are reasonable about it. But like when I was 12 years old, I would go to Hawaii, and as a kid from Oregon, I had no sun exposure. Then I drop myself into Hawaii, and the first day I jump into the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the best grounding places on the planet, is to be in an ocean, by the way. But I was in the ocean boogie boarding on a little like surfboard, and I was only out there for 20 minutes, but I got 3rd-degree burns just after 20 minutes, because not only did I have the intense sun at 11 a.m. hitting me with the UVB rays, I also had the reflection of the water off of the Pacific hitting me. So I was getting almost double the exposure within just a very short period of time. And I remember that I had like welts and blisters on my face and like on my arms and everything, because I'm an unacclimated 12-year-old from Oregon, where you get no sunlight, and then I'm dropped into a place suddenly where I'm being fried. Well, so you have to think about how you're acclimating to it. And also the Hawaiians and the natural indigenous people and people that live in Hawaii, they have built up their resistances, right, to sunlight. So they're going to be able to stay out way longer, right, in comparison to, depending on what your skin type is and how acclimated you are over the seasons and everything like that. So just like you do need to take caution. It's dose size and the exposure, and then how your body reacts. And same with grounding. Like some places out there, you don't know what you're getting. There could be like lines running under the ground. Out on my street, 20 feet away from here, I have a line running on one side of the street. And there's like even EMFs coming out of the street, like 50, 60 milligauss fields coming off of that power line that's down there, like maybe 6 or 7 feet under the ground. So if I decide, oh, I'm just going to walk out and ground myself, but you think you might be in a place where there is power going on, you could actually, like, are the risks of the power grid outweighing the risks of trying to get the grounding, right? So it's this modern world we live in, and like 200 years ago, you could just go out anywhere and ground yourself and it wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't have to risk stray voltage. Like, it's actually kind of good in a city center that your shoes are rubber, right? So it's insulating your feet from you being in contact by touching, let's say, a light pole that has stray electricity, stray voltage going through the light pole. So if I was grounding myself and I touched the light pole, I could actually shock myself and have a blast of voltage coming through my body, and it could kill me. It could, if at a high enough level. So there are people that sweep, like there's city people that go around towns that sweep the town for stray voltage when it's too high, because there is regulation in a lot of cities across the world where you have to keep it below a certain level. They like to keep it below like 9 volts if they can, like a 9-volt battery. They'll try to keep it below 9 volts, but you could be out there and there could be like 120 volts out there. If you touch it, you risk like a heart problem, right? Or something like that. And even in certain swimming areas, like where there's boat docks and where boats fill up and they have electricity coming out onto the boat dock, in the water around the boat dock, there could be a lot of stray voltage in there. So people have gone out going to go swim. They get voltage into their body and it locks up their muscles. And then they can't swim, and then they just sink and they drown. Like, this has happened in certain places.
Do you have some other EMF hacks?
I have a lot. Yeah, sun is good. I'll try to get as much, like I'll try to do the sun for the circadian rhythm. I try to hydration is really underlooked, I think. So getting a good, clean, non-fluoridated water source. I actually love, like, even from glass containers, because the BPA is in a lot of the plastic. I like to get Voss water because it's in glass, and it's really cool because they're really long. But I don't know if you've seen Voss. They're from Norway, a Norway drink.
We'll include a link and also a link about the doctor you thought about.
Well, I like to get water from glass sources when I can, and from, like, knowing actually even the deuterium, like, deuterium is another underlooked part of the biology, which I'll just talk about a little bit. Deuterium is naturally in our environment and in our oceans and in our water supply and in our foods. And we breathe in deuterium in the air. And typically on planet Earth, it's roughly about 150 to 165 parts per million of deuterium around us. Deuterium is an isotope, a stable isotope of hydrogen. Okay, so hydrogen is like a proton. It's like the number one element on the periodic table, hydrogen. There is a isotope, a different version of hydrogen that's naturally around us. That, like I said, it's like 160 parts per million, roughly. Like, I think seawater is measured at like 158 parts per million. And our biology uses deuterium for certain things, but it actually is a detriment to our biology for other processes, especially some of the energy generation processes in the mitochondria. So when you have a deuterium isotope attached to a protein, for instance, that there's an extra neutron attached to like deuterium is just basically hydrogen with an extra neutron in there. And because the proton and the neutron are about the same mass and size, it's almost like you're doubling the structure of hydrogen when you attach it to like a protein or to part of the machinery in your mitochondria. So what that does is it causes protein folding problems where the proteins don't work as well as they should, or they might not work at all. And it can have an effect in other ways, basically in the cell, which if you have a lower, like we're finding if the deuterium content in your body is low enough, then it helps your body work. But like earlier in life and in other processes and like where deuterium is supposed to work in your body, it's like kind of pulled out and used for its own purposes, right? So if you get deuterium like deeper into your mitochondrial matrix, we know, like I've read literature in the science saying that it can hitch that rotor that spins. Like if there's deuterium there, if there's too much deuterium around, that rotor that generates your energy for your ATP doesn't actually work like it should, because it's not actually keeping that Hertz rate. It's like hitching and like stopping that rotor from working that well with like higher deuterium content in your body. So that's a lot of this, I think, will be more known in the science, but like even deuterium goes way, way back because it's used like in nuclear things, right? Like we know like on the planet Mars, like the surface of Mars has like 400 to 500 parts per million of deuterium, like on the planet. Like deuterium's used as a marker for like different like experimental tests, like you'll test deuterium versus the deuterium amounts versus the hydrogen amounts. So it's used as in the science for all these other reasons as well. But I know that certain waters that you drink are going to have lower deuterium content in them. So that's another hack I do. Like I'll drink the Voss water, or I'll drink like even Evian. Because Evian water, I know what it's been tested at, and it's lower compared to some of the other sources that are tested being higher. Now, of course, you have to look at statistical testing, and every batch of water you get is going to be a little different in the amount of deuterium in it. And like some of the glacial runoff, like from Icelandic water, like the Canadian glacial water, some of the deep well water, some of the spring water, like a lot of the stuff, depending on where it's sourced from, might be way lower in deuterium content. So it's kind of good. Like I like experimenting with different water sources because I view water as more valuable than food. Water to me is more valuable than the food we eat because I know I'm always going to be eating food. So, but like you're going to be like constantly flushing water through your system, right? Like we ingest so much of it that is, and the way the water physics work with the light physics, water is very crucial. Getting a really clean, good water source can really help health and really help the mitochondria and really hydrate the cells that are in your body.
Super awesome, super awesome. I have actually a question for you. Do you want to make a second part of this, or you can say your other hacks in maybe 10 minutes? And I'm actually interested in making a second part, but I'm going to ask you if you want to do this.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a few other hacks that I do. I'll just like rattle them off. So some of the hacks I do, I increase the potassium in my diet. And I do that because of my electrosensitivities, because I know there's competition between the different channels on cell membranes. So I'll purposely find foods that are higher in potassium content and take those in, especially being more working and being around electrified and EMF environments, because that helps as a little bit of a mitigator, a tiny bit of a mitigator, just to help things work better. Knowing that my sun and my light and my water and everything is also working well, right? The circadian biology has to be a given. The days, especially, I like stay up late. or if I wake up too late in the morning and don't get outside, I'll just feel for the day. You just feel like your energy's zapped. So the potassium I actually use it's almost kind of like a cheat. And I almost don't even want people to know I do this, but like I'll take just a little tiny pinch of salt and I'll put it under my tongue. And the salt I use is it's a mixture of Celtic salt or French salts. And it's like about half of that with like what's called no salt. And there's a product called no salt. And this no salt product is made with potassium salts. So it's like a higher source of potassium in the salt. So I'll mix it so I'll get like a lot more potassium into my salt. I'll take a pinch, put it under my tongue. And that will like give me a little energy boost for an hour or two, because it just works in the blood chemistry and helps things out overall. Like on days if I play soccer or football, right? So if I'm playing a lot of football, which I have for 30 years, I'm more European that way. So I'll play. By the way, yeah, the World Cup is like everybody's looking for like France and is it Croatia or what's?
I'm actually working really hard these days, and I don't have a time, but I'm going to watch the entire World Cup after it's finished.
It's coming up here like in a day or so. But like the days I play soccer or I'm out doing yard work or it's really like I'm really stressing my body out, I'll lose more salt with sweat. So I'll want to put more salt back in, but I can even run the risk of getting a heart palpitation. Like I'll feel my heart just going, beating weird. And that's because it usually I found for me is when I've lost too many electrolytes, and I might have been hydrating a lot, but I'm not getting the electrolytes back. I'm not getting the salts back. So for the blood chemistry, so I'll make sure that I have enough potassium coming in, and I'll use that. But I'll like I said, I'll first use foods, but I might use a salt to do that. So the other major hack that I'll tell you about is intermittent fasting and fasting overall.
Using fat for fuel.
Yeah, well, exactly. And fasting literally promotes ketosis in the body. So like right now, like every day of the week, I'm usually doing somewhere between a 16-hour to a 20-hour fast. And then I'll have about like a 4 to 6 hour window where I'll eat my food in the day, and I'll usually eat it in the morning. And then by nighttime, I'll be fasting all through the night anyway. So by 10 o'clock at night, I will take a little bit of salt under my tongue just to get that little kick back in again during my fasts. So I've learned this over time to do that just because it keeps everything regulated really nicely with the electrolytes in the body. Because when you're fasting, you're right, it breaks down the fat. The fat turns into 83% carbon dioxide. So you're breathing out a lot of the fat, and it will turn the rest of it into water, which is like 17% remaining in that. And that's why typically if a person has to like go to the bathroom, pee really bad in the morning, or get up in the middle of the night to pee after a really long fast, is because the mitochondria are really cranked and they're like pushing out a lot of water into the mitochondrial matrix, which pushes more water out through the body, gets rid of and purges a lot of the bad stuff out of the body, as we know, to get the body working more efficiently. So the fasting, like I'll typically do, like I said, usually maybe like even once or twice a week, I'll still only go down to like I'll go back to like 3 meals a day and typically stop eating. always eat in the sunlight windows, but I might stop eating by 5 or 6 at night on some of the days I don't do fasting. But I have this pattern I do now. At the end of every month, I will always do at least a 2 to 3 day fast, like once a month. So that's been my pattern. And I've noticed that's working really, really well. And it's keeping the deuterium loads lower in the body. It's cranking up my energy overall. Like I probably like maybe on this video, I'm looking like, I'm erratic. I have so much energy, but it's early in the morning and I did have a little wedge of chocolate. So that's my excuse.
Super awesome. Think about the second part, because I think we need to finish. It's more than an hour, and when we share this, we'll see if the listeners are interested in doing the second part. So my proposition is on the table, so think about it. I'm leaving you with 1 minute to close for a closing statements, and I'm going to stop the live stream and the recording.
Okay. So yeah, at EMF Warriors, we just I like to post things that relate to all of what I just talked about. We dive really deep into the EMFs, how to mitigate like your environments, like what you can do to reduce your exposures to the EMFs around you, but also talk about the positive side of EMFs. Like most other groups just haven't done this, and like we are electromagnetic as living beings. So we have to like have a very strong logical approach to let people know that, hey, we are emitting EMFs. The EMFs come off of our planet naturally with the magnetic fields. Like this is a normal physics thing, but we're getting the way we're changing the EMFs is really at the heart of the issue, and it's causing problems, and it's causing problems to our health. So I put up all the time on EMF Warriors, all the biology stuff that have more direct correlative links to the EMFs for people, so they kind of like can start seeing this connection point, like what I've known about for decades, right? Like to like really get them starting to see things through a different lens outside of the normal lens that the medical profession are really seeing things through the biochemistry, and that's fine, but they just don't talk about these other sides of the biology that are there, and that's really at the heart of the problem.
Super awesome. Thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to stop the Facebook live stream right now and the YouTube, and stopping the recording.